He said, I touched the wall. He said, I cried all day. I said, Eddie, I told you a long time ago, you don't forget.
She came back and she laid in my arm, and evidently I was having a nightmare. And I went to choke her, and she had to wake me up out of my sleep.
So I was surprised to read a script that had a character that was close to my own philosophy and upbringing.
During the senior year, you either got a job, joined the service, or you went to college. I grew up with GI comic books. War was pretty much glamorized, you know? Fighting and everything. So I was ready to go to war.
Before I left for basic training, one of my college professors took me out. I was basically a country bumpkin, and he had taken it upon himself to give me my street education. And he talked to me about Nam from an infantryman's point of view. His company of 200 men had been ambushed, and only 13 had survived in the Battle of the Idrang Valley. He pulled up his shirt. He had been shot 7 times in the back and asked, "Do you want this to happen to you?" I looked at him and said, "That's not going to happen to me." And he said, "Vietnam's going to make you cry for your mother." That part did come true.
It was how do I say it? It was a hype thing because everybody talked about how tough the Marines were, how they did this and how they did that and the other. And that's why I wanted to be a Marine. They were the best, and I wanted to be the best.
First combat infantry troops had entered the war a year earlier. I'd seen enough World War II movies to realize, obviously, in a war, people are going to get killed. And in the infantry, you're going to have to end up killing some people. In order to save your own life, and for no other reason.
My first cousin was now a colonel in the Army, so military service was looked upon honorably in my family. When I graduated Penn State at 10 o'clock in the morning, I was in the Army that afternoon at Indiantown Gap Training Center for ROTC students, learning what it was like to be part of and be the leader of a military unit.
See, I had a very narrow vision back then, and I didn't think things through very well. I'd almost gone into the Marine Airborne, Corps Airborne, which means that you're flying planes, right? Now, my friends were signing up for the Airborne in the Army, and I thought that was probably pretty much the same thing. So I signed up for the Airborne as well. I didn't realize you had to jump out of the airplane.
So, what's there to sweat? It's not like you've got a big plan or anything. What's going to happen to your life? And then there's the excitement. Remember, I'm a young boy out of the Philadelphia that's going off to travel one part of the country to another on his own. I'm only 18 years old, virtually a baby. 3 months later, after basic and advanced infantry training, I'm waking up from a hangover, getting on a plane to Oakland, California, and stopping off in the cold of Alaska, the next stop being the heat of Vietnam.
It was only late March, but as soon as you stepped out of that air-conditioned plane, you got blasted. It was like, boom! This heat just absorbed you.
The door opens, and that hot, fetid, humid air is pregnant with unfamiliar smells. All of these other GIs are on the runway, and they were applauding because we were their replacements. They looked old, I mean, they were no more than our age, 17 to 21. But they looked haggard, weathered, like old men in young men's bodies.
All of a sudden, you walk off that plane and you realize, good morning, Vietnam! And all that you have thought about, all that you have talked about, trained about, suddenly, it's Vietnam. Hey, you're in hot doodle now, bro.
Everything is new and strange. Landscapes, topical, lush, green, and then you're issued a weather. That's the reality.
So, when you go up to greet your brothers, because there's always a joy to see them, they welcome you with open arms, and at that, they call it I mean, it was like you would be all into it. It was like a whole ritual.
They just process our orders and send us out everywhere. But all you wanted to do was just sit next to a big jug of water and lay down. I missed my plane 3 times to leave and join my company because I fell asleep. I got chewed out pretty bad for that.
We get on the bus, and the windows have screens in them. As we pull out of the wire of the airport, a number of children ran along the road and began to stone us. That was the reason for the screens, to prevent stones and hand grenades from entering. And I was baffled by the anger on the children's faces.
2 guys picked me up in a Jeep, drove me to the bush, where I had a meeting with the first sergeant, who informed me that we'd only be there 3, maybe 4 months, that we would kick their little yellow butts and be back on our way home. That was 64. It wasn't so.
You can't lose, right? I mean, you're bad. I mean, you got grenade launchers, and you got M16s, rocket launchers, claymore mines, frags. Now, we're fighting these guys like they portray with pajamas on and no shoes on their feet. How could you lose with the stuff you use, huh? You can't lose, right? Well, that's the short story of Vietnam.
My first 2 weeks in Vietnam, I was terrified. The only way I could get to sleep was to get drunk and pass out.
I reported in the division headquarters. It was just like in the movies, with maps on the walls and pins showing troop movements. Real top secret stuff.
So we saddled up with packs, sea rations and stuff, and we went on a march. It's a company operation. I'm 5 hours in country. I didn't know what was going on. All I knew, I was in single file with these other guys right in front of me. So we're walking, and all of a sudden, boom! I hear this big explosion, maybe 50 yards up ahead of me. I run up, and there was 2 bodies, ripped apart. One guy was all gunpowder black. He was twitching. The corpsman was kneeling over him. I yell, "He's alive!"
No, he's dead. He's dead. Don't worry about it.
That was my first look at war. I hated it.
I mean, when I say field, I'm talking about jungles. I mean, real jungles. And you set up a perimeter. You got an M79 grenade launcher, 2 riflemen, a machine gun and an ammo bearer, and a squad leader, plus any number of men. So you basically got a group that sets up an ambush in the hope that one day you may find the enemy moving through the jungle, dee-dee-bopping down the trail. The enemy was good. I mean, he melted into the turf. He just knew certain things about his tactics.
He's gonna fight. He's not gonna fight. Unless he believes he has an advantage. Then he'll go after you. Otherwise, he'll avoid you or he'll run away.
We're out 50 meters in front of the patrol. Rocky's dog senses something, and he goes to the rear to let the patrol leader know what he thinks we've encountered. I'm alone, in combat position, ready to fire. I take off all my ammunition, lay it in front of me, so I can have quick access. I point my weapon and prepare to shoot anything that moves. And that's when the reality of Vietnam hits me. That I was in a war, that I could die.
It's quiet. It's eerie. And then, all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. See, I'm scared. I've never been in a firefight before.
Bullets are hitting people, hitting helmets, ricocheting and hitting men, hitting patty dikes next to you. Trees and bushes are falling down.
I mean, the firepower starts coming from everywhere. Because you're no longer dealing with a bunch of rifle-toting, black pajama-wearing, undisciplined, Vietcong dirt farmers. I mean, you're dealing with fatigue-wearing, helmet-wearing, AK-47 equipped, fully loaded with ammunition, grenade-launching, concussion grenades, well-trained military officers and men coming down the trail.
You know, it's really exciting and terrifying at the same time. The only thing you can do is rock up. Your knees and your legs, they turn to water.
You're high. I don't know what to call it. It's just your senses are so aware of everything that moves, everything you hear. Because you know that this is going to happen to you unless you see it first, unless you stop it from happening to you.
Then I ran, and I could hear the bullets hitting all around me. I can't remember how we made it. We got to the front, and there was this wounded sergeant. And he was hollering and screaming, and we tried to put some cover down with our machine guns, and somehow we managed to get him out of there.
Fear rushes, adrenaline, and your heart's pumping and pounding. Make you almost feel the blood pressure in your arms. You can almost hear it. And it'd be so loud, your heart throbbing, watching what bullets do to a human body. And it was one thing to see blood from the enemy. It's another to see blood from another American.
We used to sit in the back of our hooches on top of the bunker every night. And if somebody was running into heavy shit outside the wire, we could tell by the number of helicopters coming in and landing at the mortuary about 100 yards away. And some nights we sat out there and literally cried because the dust-offs were coming in so thick and then turning right back around and flying straight back out to the scene of the battle to bring in more dead soldiers.
Finally, the jets came in and started bombing, and dirt started dumping on our heads. The battle stopped, and then the bad guys took off. It was my first time in combat. I was so relieved, so scared and frightened that my knees shook. The other guys made fun of me. I guess they couldn't allow themselves to display such weakness.
The battle matured me. I experienced maturity rapidly in a matter of hours. No longer a child playing cowboys and Indians. I'm involved in a real war. Taking the lives of other human beings and watching other human beings lose their lives.
It was new to us to see Vietnamese people sit on their heels all the time. They didn't sit on chairs or lean on a wall. They'd crouch down on their heels for hours and have conversation. It was mystical. and fascinated us to look at them and see Mama Sans and Papa Sans with their black stained teeth from chewing betel nut. But you have your weapon with you. You don't go anywhere without your weapon.
Laziness could cause you death in an army. So if you were lazy, and if you didn't take the extra step, if you walked a little too slow, you was a goner. When I got shot, I mean, this talking is forcing myself to recognize that I don't want to remember it. It's difficult.
Let it go, bro.
Yes, that's man.
Everybody knows weapons hit you. They tore your body up. You never seen anything like it before. You never want to again.
3, 2, 1, go!
And my shirt's full of blood. I got shot in the throat. The round came right in behind my jugular and exited right above my backbone. It was at the moment, the instant I turned to run. If I had been the bad guy, I probably would have had my throat in his sights. I spent one night in the hospital. I was very lucky. Very lucky. My wounds were open. There's some preliminary work done on your nerves. Surgery tried to do the nerve repair. They cut them, cleaned the wound. I believe it was in Saigon. I went to the 106th General Hospital in Japan and stayed for about 2 months. 2 months. Then there's more surgery.
That's bad.
Bad. Bad. Let me tell you how bad this was, man. You're in like a auditorium. It's cold. And for every square in this area the size of a basketball court, there was a bed, a soldier. That's the line to go into the operation. Some are getting amputations. Some are getting artificial limbs. Some are getting body parts removed, body parts restored. Other people are getting brain surgery. That's what the 106 was. An assembly line of rebuilding up human torn bodies. That's what war was like. That's what the hospital was like. That's what Vietnam was like. "30 days for me, I was had an attaché case and a suit and tie. And thought I could do just like guys did, before. Forget about the war, start a life, be involved. But I didn't realize that I was just putting everything back so far in my mind and stuff, but things will always resurface. Different attitudes, different things that you do in your life, and you say, why am I doing this? Why am I feeling this? Why am I still having nightmares?
I went to see my father, who was World War II paratrooper and fought in the Battle of the Bulge. We lived in Arizona at that time, and I stopped in to see him. He was so proud of me and proud of my service. He said, "Hank, let's go over here to the VFW hall, introduce you to some of my comrades over there." We went over there, and it wasn't 5 minutes that I was in that place, and some of these older veterans from World War II began denigrating my service, saying that it wasn't a real war. We were in the big one. We knew how to win one. And my father was so embarrassed when he left. He was embarrassed about the behavior of his comrades. And so it's one thing to be denigrated by civilians that don't know nothing, but it's another thing to be denigrated by people who ought to know better.
And again, for the families out there, other veterans, You know, thank you so much for what you do. And if you don't, but if you put a care in, I appreciate that so much. I appreciate you caring. Because if you didn't care, you wouldn't have your behinds parked in those chambers.
I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand why my brother's not married. I couldn't understand how he could drink and just become a different person. I couldn't understand where was my brother. I couldn't understand it because he wasn't in Vietnam. I'm like, well, he wasn't in Vietnam. What's wrong with him? The war is war. And it's the mindset that changes. And I like to say thank you for the knowledge and for the sharing and just him having a heart to be a part of this, to help somebody else understand.
He went out on disability, and I never saw him for a couple of years. My wife and I were up in Paoli one day shopping. I walked by these two cars, and this guy sitting in the car blowing the horn. And I looked, I didn't know the car, so I kept walking. Guy jumped out and said, "Yo!" I looked at this guy, Eddie. So he came over and we talked a little bit, and he says, "I got to tell you something." I said, "What?" He said, "My wife and I toured Washington 6 months ago." He said, "Bobby, I went to the wall for the first time in my life." He said, "I touched the wall." He said, "I cried all day." I said, "Eddie, I told you a long time ago, you don't forget."
That's right. My 3-year-old daughter, when she was 3 years old, she's now 28. When she was 3 years old, she was the first one to diagnose that I had a problem. She told me at 3 years of age, she said, "Daddy, you have a serious problem."
Your family's going to be dramatically impacted by it because you don't know, they don't know, you know something's going on wrong with you, they don't know what's going on with you. But if our city was able to speak to that, then it's a better place to return upon coming home.
It wasn't until my wife got up to go to the bathroom one night, and what you were talking about, coming back and she came back and she laid in my arm, and evidently I was having a nightmare. And I went to choke her, and she had to wake me up out of my sleep. So, the reason why I never admitted to it before is because to me, it was a sign of weakness and guilt that I was not successful. So a lot of veterans are walking around carrying this burden because it's like a shame, that you don't have it all together. And so just up until 5 years ago, I was pushing it and suppressing it, So, it's something that you don't want to come out and always admit, because it is a sign of, in your own head, a sign of failure, a sign of weakness, So a lot of veterans keep that inside, and that's what I've been doing since 1969.
It takes time for all of us, and I'm still trying to heal, and thank you very much for being with us tonight.